what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lust, the Pond Boss, coming at you live from the shores of Lusk Landing right here on the Brazos River right outside of Granbury, Texas. Circle back where we're going to end up finishing our lives on the shores of the river where the grandkids can skip rocks and come and hang out. We have a pool. They'll love it. And so, hello, Tim Stewart. Good to see you, buddy. Checking in from South Florida. Do they still raise oranges in Florida? I know they raise honeybees because that's what you do. Guys, you know what? I thought tonight I would start talking about population dynamics. And since we've got one viewer, I guess I probably ought to hang out and wait just a few minutes for several other people to come because Tim Stewart already knows all this stuff. So guys, let's get this party started. Hey, you know the drill. Hashtag PondBoss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this to your timeline, and you're eligible for a drawing for a PondBoss something, like a hat or something, whatever Leanne says. So here we go. So I thought tonight I'd start off the conversation talking about population dynamics, which, you know, that's not really a favorite topic of a lot of people, but I'm going to do the best I can to make it entertaining. So population dynamics of a fishery, and Tim Stewart is a classic example of somebody that's got to learn about the, come on down to Florida when it gets chilly in Texas. Okay. It doesn't get chilly in Florida, except maybe once a year. Hello, John Dyer. Good to see you, buddy. He's got the deal there. Hashtag PondBoss Magazine. We got 4 viewers and 2 reactions. So you guys chime in. I'm going to talk about population dynamics in the beginning. Then we're going to shift gears and talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. But the population dynamics of a lake or a pond, whenever I go design a lake and I start thinking about population dynamics, of course, you guys that have been around me know here's the 5 things. And I know that Tim, your audience of 1 loves population dynamics. I love having an audience of 1, especially when it's Tim Stewart. And John Dyer. Oh, somebody else has popped in. Can't wait to find out who that is. So when I go design a lake, the very first things, and you guys, I know that Tim and John know this, but the very first things I look at is I want to make sure the water's happy, that the habitat is what all the different sizes of all the different species of fish need to be able to thrive. Make sure we got the right food chain. It takes 10 pounds of bait fish for a game fish to gain a pound. It takes 10 pounds of food at every level, every trophic level of the food chain. It takes 10 pounds of plankton to grow a pound of insects. It takes 10 pounds of insects to grow a pound of bigger insects. It takes 10 pounds of bigger insects to grow a pound of fish, small fish. It takes 10 pounds of small fish to grow a pound of medium-sized fish. It takes 10 pounds of medium-sized fish, yada, 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 yada. You guys know the drill on that. Hello, Charles Hury. Good to see you from Princeton, Indiana. So when I start thinking about population dynamics, basically, here's the science behind that. Population dynamics are based on birth rate, the recruitment, the growth rates, mortality. And mortality is not necessarily related to fish that die. It's related to fish that get eaten. You know, so mortality rates are pretty dadgum high in a healthy fishery. The mortality rates of fish in a really healthy fishery is probably going to knock on the door of 95%. And that sounds a little scary, but that's the reality of it. You know, and so when you know that going in, then you can start planning accordingly and understand it and know how the different trophic levels of the food chain work. Population dynamics are kind of built on models. There's some models out there where you can plug in some numbers and see how that thing works. It's also based on sustainable management practices. Are you feeding the fish? Like Ron Krisman feeds his fish. He's got his smallmouth bass on feed there south of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hello, John Henry and John Funk. Good to see you. It's your second summer. Well, you must have had a small fall because we kind of did. Glad to see John join us. John doesn't get to usually play on Tuesday nights, but here he is. Good to see him. You know, sustainable management practices means the right kind of harvest. You know, it means that you have enough of predator fish of certain sizes that can feed on the prey fish and keep them active, in the sense that whenever prey fish get eaten, the remaining prey fish try to fill the gap by reproducing. That's why we use bluegill as the primary source of food, as the backbone of the food chain for largemouth bass lake. Because bluegill can spawn multiple times a year, depending on where you are. You know, up there where John Funk is, they may only spawn once. They might spawn twice. I don't know. Lori Moreno One Key. Hello, Lori Moreno One Key. Bill Schrum. Hey, Bob. Hey, Bill. Talking about population dynamics at the moment. You know, so I think the concepts to wrap your brains around is that there's recruitment, there's growth rates, there's mortality, there's models that you can begin to figure out when you're tracking relative weights of your bass or your bluegills or a combination of both. There's sustainable management practices such as feeding, maintaining fertility, managing aquatic plants. So sustainable management practices is that something that's kind of like an art that we all have to kind of figure out how we're going to be able to, you know, how we're going to be able to play the game. You know, and then there's overfishing, underfishing, you know, and all those things kind of play a role in the population dynamics of your pond or lake. Brent Ruggieri says, you said that not all bass you transplant from one body of water to another will adapt the same. Should I bring bass into my pond from another pond and not necessarily a lake or river? No. So here's the way that works. And the population dynamics, they fit into that part of the deal, that part of the game. So let's take Brent. Brent's got a good question here. So he said that not all bass you transplant from one body of water. Doesn't matter the body of water. Doesn't matter if it's a river, a lake, a stream, you know, or a puddle. When you take a fish, especially a game fish, that has grown up in that body of water over there, then you move it to this body of water over here, they're not necessarily going to make that transition. And the reason is that fish respond through a process called plasticity. Plasticity is a biological concept where, with fish, since that's what we're talking about, you take a fish and you grow it up in that environment and it thrives, and you take it from that environment and you move it to another one. It doesn't matter how good that environment is. If that fish can't recondition or respond to that new habitat, it's going to deteriorate. And my experience has told me that we'll just play the math game. Let's say we take 100 adult largemouth bass that grew up in these environments over here, and we move them into your perfect conditions. 20 of them are going to do great. 15 or 20 of them are going to be okay. The rest are not going to grow, or they're going to deteriorate and die. And it's because those fish don't have any capability of reasoning. They don't know how to think. They don't know how to adjust. And therefore, they won't make the cut. And even if they're fantastic fish, doesn't mean they're going to do it, that they're going to make it. You know, so the answer to that is it doesn't matter if they're coming from a pond or a river or a lake. And it actually, you know, if you think about this, fish, let's take predator fish like a largemouth bass that grew up in a river. It's used to moving water. It's used to having to seek out its prey because it's got to go chase it down somewhere. Whereas in a pond, they can ambush. Where in a river, ambushing is not likely because those bait fish are always on the move. So the game fish are going to have to go seek them out, try to find them, and take them out and feed on them. So fish coming from a river, the percentages are probably even higher for failure than coming out of a pond. Water. let's see what John Funk's got here. Once and done, it's no fun, but that's northern small. Yeah, I hate it for John. John had a big winter kill, and that's one of the risks. Let's take a minute and talk about winter kill. Winter kill is where fish die under the ice, and it's because they run out of oxygen. So how does that happen? How do they run out of oxygen? Well, there's two sources of oxygen in water. One is from photosynthesis from plants, and the other one is just absorbing it from the atmosphere. So when you get that layer of ice on top of a lake or a pond, like where John is, he probably gets 18 inches of ice in the wintertime. And since there's no way for that cloudy ice to allow sunlight to penetrate, the plants can no longer photosynthesize, so which means they're not going to produce any oxygen. So they're going to consume it. So are the fish. Everything that's in the water is consuming oxygen. And since that's what's going on, and they can't contact the atmosphere, then that fishery is only going to last as long as there is oxygen that's enough that's available to sustain that fish population. So if there's still plants under the water that are respiring, they're using oxygen, so are the fish, and at some point the oxygen levels plummet to where there's not enough to support the fishery, and then they die. And that's winter kill in northern tier water. Now, John, there's a couple things you can do. You can look at ways to figure out how to aerate, how to move the water. The risk that you run there is you can make the water be too cold, and you can also make your pond be unsafe. Because if you've got an open hole because you're aerating, you got an open hole in the winter and a deer falls in it, or a mink, or a small child. If you're going to aerate a northern pond and do it in water less than 3 feet deep. Now that sounds easy, and I don't know how easily it's going to be done with diffused aeration, because water less than about 6 feet, and that doesn't work so good. Jason Dodd, what's the better forage, a 5-inch bluegill or an 8-inch golden shiner? I guess it depends on what's going to eat it. So with these, that's a good question to kind of dig into the population dynamics. So when you're talking about population dynamics, Jason Dodd, and you're asking the question about which is the better forage fish, the best forage fish is whatever a bass can eat. But wait, like Ron Popeil used to say, with his Ronco Fish-O-Matic, there's more. What population of fish are able to sustain themselves over the long haul? Is it shiners, or is it bluegill, or is it a combination of both of them? And probably in your case, near Wichita, Kansas, this is going to be both. I don't know why I'm yawning, but I am. Maybe because I'm sleepy. So, to give you the best answer on that, a 5-inch bluegill is probably 3 years old. An 8-inch golden shiner is probably 4 years old, which is reaching its maximum lifespan. So when you can understand how each species of fish reproduces, how they eat, where they fit into each niche, into that habitat, then you can begin to understand the population dynamics a little bit more. For example, golden shiners are notorious nest raiders. They'll come in and they'll eat the eggs of a bluegill. They're going to spawn before bluegills do in the spring, but bluegills are going to be the mules. They're going to pull the plow. They're going to reproduce over and over and over. And those golden shiners are going to do everything they can to eat all those little bitty bluegill eggs. So, must not have slept too good last night. Not water. So the answer to Jason Dodd's question is a 5-inch bluegill or an 8-inch golden shiner better? Depends on which fish is able to sustain its population and how big the bass are to eat it. As a matter of fact, a 3.5-pound bass can eat either a 5-inch bluegill or an 8-inch golden shiner. So if you've got some 5-pound bass, they're good. Brent was wondering, what is the mortality rate on transplanted fish? I'm going to tell you the mortality rate's 100%. But depends on when they die. So let's kind of tackle that deal. Let's say, Brent, that you go and move, let's say you move 100 bass that are 3 to 5 years old, and their expected lifespan is 8 to 10 years. Say they're northern strain bass. Hello, Mark Hicks. Hello, Kenny Sanderson. Hello, Bob Jones. Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. I'll get to that here in just a minute. Say you move 100 bass that are 3 to 5 years old, and you're in the northern tier states. The mortality rate, you won't know that from those transplanted fish until the third year. By the third year, the fish that are going to deteriorate have disappeared. The fish that are going to thrive or look like footballs. They're going to do really well. So out of 100, there'll be 25 that are just really thriving. There'll be another 15 or 20, 25 maybe. They're doing pretty good. All the rest are staying the same or deteriorating, or they're going to be gone. And I have transplanted a lot of fish over the years, and it took me a long time to begin to figure this out. And I was able to begin to figure it out by electrofishing these different lakes. And over a long span of time, you can really see fish that you've transplanted and tagged and you've tracked, and you can see that there is going to be a mortality rate. So I'm going to tell you the mortality rate, the 3-year mortality rate of transplanted adult fish, largemouth bass, is going to be at least 50%. That's my answer, and I think I can justify that. Bob Jones, hello, Bobby West, getting closer. Yeah, buddy, I talked to Landon Wyatt today with Aquafix in Great Lakes Biosciences. He's excited about coming. He's going to do some sediment samples and some water chemistry and teach people how to do that. We're going to have a great time at the Institute of Higher Pondology. That's what Bobby West is talking about. The Institute of Higher Pondology. Now, while I'm talking about that, since Bobby brought it up, we've got room for 2 more people. It's $1,500. It's well worth it. Jim Allen knows how well worth it is. So does John Dyer. So does Tim Stewart. So does Bobby West. You guys know the value of it. So, we've got room, and I got to tell you, I'm as excited about this one. No, I'm not going to say that. I am more excited about this one than any one we've ever done. We're going to have at least 25 people there, of which 6 of them are going to be sponsors. And of those sponsors, Texas Hunter's coming. I talked to Andy Benson today with Mossback Fish Habitat. He's coming. Bird Dog is coming. David Schneiderman's coming with Easy Docks of Texas. Haven't talked to anybody with Karina Mills yet. Texas Hunter's Cody Borgfield's going to be there. And Landon Wyatt's coming. So all those guys, they're all going to be on the program. And they're all going to be giving you some really good meat that you can use. And the population dynamics of the Institute of Higher Pondology, it's going to be pretty magical, because we've got people from all walks of life. We've got a couple of pond management companies represented. We've got wildlife biologists coming. We've got ranch managers. We've got landowners. It's a good, diverse network of people that you guys are going to get some good stuff out of. Got room for 2 more people. $1,500, which includes food. Doesn't include housing, but we've got some rooms blocked. I think they're $85 a night for this boutique hotel in Tacoma, Texas. So we got room for 2 more. If you want to come, let us know pretty quick, because I'm putting the itinerary and the agenda together. I guess one of the biggest highlights is we're going to go analyze Jimmy Houston's lakes. We're going to have at least 2 electrofishing boats. I'm hoping for more, but time will tell that tale. And you'll get to hang out with Jimmy Houston. We're going to shoot some video footage. He's thinking he can put together a TV show based on what we're doing. So it's going to be a pretty big deal. Hello, Jim Allen. And I see Jim Allen's got a good testimony down there. Ron Crisman, last week you talked about fish feeding more going into fall to put fat on for the winter. My older fish have started to feed more heavy, but my fish from this year's spawn are not. Is this a learned thing from going through past winters? Or, yeah, that's part of the deal. But it's not so much to put on fat as it is to put on flesh with fat. And the fat is basically where they can store enough carbohydrates. It's not really carbohydrates. It's more like energy stores, so that when these fish go into the wintertime, they don't have to metabolize their flesh. They can metabolize the fat. So that's kind of how that works. So the question is, my older fish have started to feed more heavy. Yeah, that is a learned response, but it's also a natural response, because those fish instinctively understand, not cognitively, but naturally, from a population dynamic standpoint, that they have got to build up some stores. Because here's the way that works. When a fish is feeding in the fall, it's trying to gain enough weight so that it doesn't have to metabolize its flesh. If a fish has to metabolize flesh rather than fat over the wintertime, then it has to make that up. And any time a fish has got to make it up, it loses time. When it loses time, it loses potential. So right now, from now until Christmas, depending on where you live, that's the time that your fish are going to gain the most weight that they possibly can all year long. You know, in the springtime, they're dialed in on spawning. They're dialed in on reproduction. They're dialed in on recovery. You know, and then the food chain is expanding. Now the food chain is expanded. It's going to be as big as it can be going into the fall. And John Dyer texted me. Hey, Bob, great nuggets tonight. Have Leanne send me a link to the download to tonight's live. I want to cut it into some vignettes. I love John. He's trying to help us figure out how to play the game. Let's see here. Jim Allen says, well worth it. Never know if there'll be another, so get it while it's up. That's right. Is Otto? Yes, Otto's going to be there. Mike Otto's going to be there on Thursday, I think. I'm working on that with him. He's going to talk about building. Hello, Travis Walker. Good to see you, buddy. Let me see if I've missed anything here. I don't think I have. Here I am, sound like I'm promoting myself. I'm really not. I'm promoting opportunities for you guys to learn more about this pond management stuff. Where's Bay? Where's Bay? Bay should be chiming in by now. He must be doing something tonight. All right, I'm looking through this. I'm not seeing a whole lot of things. You know what? It's almost 8 o'clock. Let me do a commercial. You know, we do have some pretty good sponsors that are going to show up at the Institute of Higher Pondology. It's going to be at West Haven Ranch, north of St. Joe. If you want some more intel on it, send an email to info@pondboss.com, and either Leanne or I will respond to that. We'll send you a little flyer. Give me your phone number. I'll call you and tell you about it. But it's, I tell you what, Jim Allen will back me up on this. Danny Mack, if he's watching it. David Schneiderman, if he's watching this, you know, these guys will back me up on this. The money that you spend coming to the Institute of Higher Pondology will save you more than that for the dumb tax you'd pay if you didn't come. And that right there carries a great amount of value. Plus, you get to hang out with some pretty cool people. You get to build a network. You know, what's interesting to me is even to this day, there are text threads from attendees, even 5 years ago, between guys that are still sharing ideas that they got back then, and they got to become friends. So I can tell you it's going to be well worth it. Now, I don't think Chris Blood will chime in right now because he's at Key West. He sent me a little text in the picture last night that kind of made me jealous, where he's hanging out watching the sunset in Key West with his bride, Mary. But Texas Hunter Products, I love those guys. My gosh, you know, I've been working with those guys since the 90s, since the 1990s. And not only do they have great products, but they've got great customer service. If something goes wrong, which is not common, they are going to be checking in. John Henry, the dates are October 23, which is a Thursday. You show up by noon, and we're going to hit the ground running. At noon, we're going to have a lunch at noon, and then we're going to go through a curriculum, a fast-paced curriculum, supper at 6, relax a little bit, and then we're going to meet up on Thursday morning, the 24th of October. We're going to go to Jimmy Houston's ranch, which is about an hour and a half ride. Bobby West has got a 15-passenger van. Then we'll take a couple of pickup truckloads of people pulling shocker boats. And then we'll go spend the day with Jimmy, electrofishing his lakes, collecting samples, doing water chemistry, doing sediment samples, weighing and measuring fish, shooting video footage. Chico's coming. We're going to put together some really, really cool instructional videos for you guys. So that's when it's going to be, October 23, 24, 25. The weather should be pretty mild. And, of course, with our luck, it'll rain, so bring rain gear. We don't care if it rains. Let's see. Mark Hicks says, is there a... Oh, you know what? Let me finish the commercial. David Schnaderman, Easy Docks of Texas. He's a sponsor of Pond Boss. Purina Mills. I love their feeds. Kenny Sanderson knows the nature of the beast of the business piece. But, you know, I've been able to work with Purina Mills since 1995. Good gosh, 30 years. Working with them to help develop some of the best feeds. Wish they'd work with me to develop some of the best business practices. But they have great fish food. And the thing about Purina that I love is that they use the best ingredients. They're not trying to make the best pricing, which that kind of kicks them in the butt in the marketplace. But if you want great feeds, great ingredients, great products, that's your company. They're the ones that do that. BirdDogIt.com. That's my son Jonathan's company. He's created a really interesting niche. You know, even if he wasn't my son, I'm still fascinated with his entrepreneurship, his fervor, and his energy levels, because he's really, really rocking. There's Greg McMillan. Greg McMillan's coming to the next Institute of Higher Pondology. Hey, Greg, I talked to Landon Wyatt a couple hours ago. He'll be responding to your email tonight. And what we're going to do with you, Greg, is Landon's going to send you a kit to collect some sediment samples and some water samples to send back to him, and we're going to use that intel as part of a case study to teach people at the next Institute of Higher Pondology. So, cheers. This is not Woodford. Either is this. This is water. This is not. This is purple. Grapes are involved. So, Greg, I'm pretty fired up, dude. So look for Landon White to a Natural Lake Biosciences to be in touch with you. He said he'd email you tonight. He actually went to the Wisconsin-Alabama football game in Tuscaloosa, and he's a Wisconsin fan. So they didn't have as good a weekend as they wanted to. So Mark Hicks says, did I get on my commercials? Oh, Pond Boss Magazine. Dude, I forgot about that. Here's how it comes. It comes to you in a plastic bag, hermetically sealed, like Johnny Carson used to say. So I'm on the subscription list because I like to see if it shows up on time. Then I take all mine, leave them in the plastic bag, and I go put them in the closet because I figure someday I'll be gone and it might be an auction item. Yeah, right. I know y'all are laughing at that, and I'm laughing at that. So let's see. I got Bird Dog It, Easy Docks, Texas Hunter, Purina, Pond Boss. Oh, $35 a year. Cheaper than a Friday night date, and it lasts a year. It's full of nuggets. This one, this is the, what month is this? This is July, August. We did a genetic study. Oh. At the Institute of Higher Pondology, I'm going to take you right through this genetic study that's in here that we did at Bay Miltonberger's place. Fascinating science. It's really, really interesting to dig into the genetics and do something that other people really aren't doing much. There's Danny Mack. I wonder, Danny, I was talking about you earlier, dude. Danny's coming. Danny Mack came, I think, to the very first Institute of Higher Pondology. He got to go to Jimmy Houston's ranch the first time we did it. So Danny Mack's going to be pretty fired up. So I think I covered all the sponsorships. Y'all tell me if I missed one. Y'all listen to this all the time. Heck, I don't. I just do it. So, hey, bring me some questions, because if not, I'm probably going to run out of juice here pretty quick. So you guys, John Dyer kind of went to AI and dug one up last week about the Brazos River, and I think I was able to handle that one. So you guys pitch me some stuff. John Henry totally rebuilt 2 ponds, 2.5 acres and 5 acres in north central Mississippi. Would you recommend any plants for structure? If so, what kind? I love American pondweed. I love eelgrass. Man, I'm a big fan of most of the pondweeds that have leaves. I'm not as big a fan of bushy pondweed because it has a density that's a little bit too thick. But the plants that I would use, and here's the thing about it. If you renovated those ponds and you made sure that you minimize shallow water, then you're going to get some plants to grow. Tim Stewart, does anyone want to bring an electrofishing boat to Florida this fall or winter? Man, when I was younger, I would do that. I'd charge an arm and a leg. And now that I'm 70, I don't want to go to Florida dragging an electrofishing boat. And I'll tell you what, things happen. Bearings go out, tires wear out. You get there, you might, there's so many things that, I'm not going to say all that because I'm the eternal optimist. Solitude's probably going to bring one down there. I don't know. You might check with those guys. They're advertisers in Pond Boss. You might check with Solitude Lake Management. They might be doing that. Okay, boys, you need to pitch me something because I kind of shot my wad on the population dynamics topic. So, another thing about population dynamics that was striking me is the population dynamics of a fishery hinge on a couple of fundamentals. Number one is how well the fish can reproduce. Tim Stewart, I know about things. You know what? I saw something on Facebook yesterday, like you had something bad happen to you hauling a load of honeybees. So, and you, dude, I don't know what all you've been through, but I do know the things that I see on social media, and you do have issues. And I cannot imagine hauling honeybees with nets over them, and you have some kind of a issue on the road. I don't know how that works. So, population dynamics. The fundamentals of population dynamics is recruitment. How well do the fishery produce? What are your growth rates? What's the mortality? And it's kind of hard to predict that except when you're able to weigh and measure some fish along the way. If you weigh and measure fish and you see relative weights dropping, then you know that mortality rates are a little bit lower. I mean, you'll never know the percentages, although the percentages are always high, because nature's job is to reproduce enough fish to replace the parents, and that's it. So if a largemouth bass has 35,000 eggs with the intent to replace itself and the other fish, the mommy and the daddy, that means there's a 99.9% mortality rate, which is absolutely normal. And so you look at, with population dynamics, we're looking at, can we feed the fish? Do we maintain a fertility level? Does our habitat model help sustain the population dynamics? That's kind of fish talk to say, do you have enough of the right kind of habitat to increase survival rates of the small fish to get to become bigger nuggets to be more significant in the food chain? So all these things tie together. So when you've got really, really happy water that's not distressing to the fish, and you've got the best habitat for all the size classes of all the different species, you got the right food chain to feed all those size classes of the different species of fish, then your population dynamics are going to roll in harmony. Never happens. So I don't want to throw that at you, but that's just the way nature works. So part of your deal is, how can I monitor it? How can I monitor my population dynamics? Well, first of all, you got to verify reproduction. You can do that with shoreline seine samples in June. You can do that by fishing with a night crawler under a bobber or a small spinnerbait or a crankbait. Catch, weigh, measure, plot. If you don't have our spreadsheet, send me an email. I'll send you a copy of the spreadsheet to help you plot the progress of your fish. The spreadsheet now, with between Jim Allen and John Dyer, has got like 5 species of fish in it, and you can be tracking it. And so that's ways that you can manage it. And John Dyer just pitched tilapia, and so tilapia. So so here's something else about population dynamics. I'm glad you did that, John. Population dynamics is based on immigration and immigration. I or E. So you got fish that are coming in by reproduction or by stocking, and you got fish that are leaving. And so when you start putting all that stuff together and trying to figure it out, stocking tilapia in certain ponds where it's legal, you can increase survival rates of your young of the year bluegills. So when you start thinking about all these different things you can do to bolster the dynamics of your fishery, then the end gain is you're going to see much, much better growth rates and larger individual sizes of those fish that you're trying to manage for. So, it's a complicated matter, but when you start drilling down into it to simplify it, it's supplying everything that all your fish need for all sizes and all species. If you can do that, then you're going to have the healthiest population dynamics. I'm going to tell you the odds of that happening, pretty low. But the odds of you thinking about it, pretty high. The more that you think about it, then the more that you can do it, the more likely you are to succeed with it. Hello, Brian Nutt. Brian Nutt says, hi, Bob. Hi, Brian. Okay, let me back up here a little bit. Lori says, I'm trying to keep my water level up in my Northern California pond. Days are hot, but nights are cool. Is well water too cold? I don't know. How cold is your well water? I'll tell you this, that even cold well water doesn't take long to warm up in a pond environment, and vice versa. I've seen well water in the 90s. I've seen well water in the 40s. But when you're spitting that well water into a pond, it kind of depends on the weather patterns, and it depends on the rate of flow from the well. So well water is, I tell you what, Lori, well water won't be too cold. No, I'm going to tell you not. I'm going to tell you what. I don't care what your water temperature is coming out of the well, it will not be too cold. Bob Jones, do catfish significantly compete with largemouth bass or prey such as bluegill? Absolutely, yes, they do. A 2.5 pound channel catfish, for example, is going to compete with a 4 pound bass. Or, well, actually, more like a 2 pound bass. So, yes, channel catfish do significantly compete with largemouth bass or prey. A 2.5 pound channel catfish is not going to thumb its nose at a bluegill. It's going to eat it. And people seem to think that channel catfish are scavengers. They're not. They're predator fish. Bullheads, people are convinced bullheads are scavengers, which they'll do that if they have to. But I've been stunned over the years at the bullhead catfish that I've caught that have eaten crawfish, shad, baby turtles. I have found some weird stuff in bullhead catfish. They're more predatory than you think. So yes, catfish can significantly compete with largemouth bass for prey. So let's see what John Dyer's got here. I noticed the stocking tilapia has affected the bluegill spawning dynamics. They have not spawned since early July when I stocked them. They stunned for the season. No. So what tilapia tend to do is tilapia tend to increase survival rates of newly stocked bluegill. If you look at it like this, they tend to not compete for spawning space because tilapia are mouth breeders. Even though a male tilapia will dig what looks like a hoof print, a solitary hoof print, like where a cow stepped in the pond, and then they're mouth breeders. So they're going to take the eggs in the mouths of the male, and the male's going to hatch those eggs and then spit them out in the water. It's really fun. At LL Common 2, I had a couple of ponds where I grew tilapia all summer long. Then I bring them in and overwinter them in a heated facility where we had aquaponics garden, which is really fun. And I could walk around those ponds about this time of year and watch the tilapia. And if you kind of ease along the shore, you could see them. The males will come right along the shore, and they'll spit the babies out just a few inches, sit there for a minute, and suck them right back in. And they did that. They did that until the yolk sac was gone. Then they spit the babies out, and then the babies are on their own. They're out filter feeding, eating algae, whatever they can graze on. So I have not stocked tilapia to the point, mass-wise, where they have affected bluegill spawns. So I'm not going to say that hasn't happened, because obviously you're seeing that. If the bluegill have only spawned, okay, I notice that stocking tilapia has affected the bluegill spawning dynamics. They've not spawned since early July when I stocked them. Based on that question, what you're saying to me is the bluegill spawning dynamics has changed. But you said that it doesn't look like the tilapia spawning dynamics. So the bluegill haven't spawned since early July when you stocked them. So the way I'm reading that question is you stocked bluegill in early July. Well, bluegill don't like hot water necessarily to be able to reproduce. So what I presume, based on that question, what I can see happening is it's the bluegill haven't spawned, but it has nothing to do with the tilapia. It has everything to do with the water temperature. And once the water temperature mitigates, which is about right now, you should start seeing bluegill on beds again. Jim Allen, we still don't have any aquatic plants in our lake. The herbicide really knocked them out. Any guess when they might recover? Or should we consider eelgrass and American pondweed yet? So the thing about that, Jim, is that when the plants are taken out by herbicides, then what happens is when those plants decompose, their nutrient content kind of gets recycled into the lake and allows the lake to grow more plankton. But you've had flushing rains, So as long as there's a pretty dense plankton bloom, you're probably not going to grow any aquatic plants. Now, if the issue, I tell you what I would do in that lake if I lived there, because I've been to that lake. So what I would consider is next spring, I would build several exclusion cages, which you can use 1 by 2 inch welded wire, make a cylinder 30 inches in diameter, shove it in the mud in about 2 feet of water, not far from your house, and see what grows in it. Now, if you want to plant something like American pondweed in it, you can do that. But I think what you find out if you build 4 or 5 exclusion cages, that you'll start to see some plants grow in it. And what you'll find out is that there's a different reason that the plants aren't growing in there right now, but not because of the nutrient load, but something else that's going on, like turtles are chewing the base of the plants off. Something's feeding on them, carp, I don't know, but I bet you if you put up some exclusion fences, you'd see something different. Okay, let's see, Tim Stewart, can a population of golden shiners and large bluegill decimate a year's spawn of largemouth bass? Yes, they can. I've not found any fingerling or young of the year bass. Yes, they can. Golden shiners are notorious nest raiders, and bluegill, with a mouth that's that big, it's a 6-inch bluegill, it'll suck down a little largemouth bass just as fast as it can sing grace. Water. It's the thing. Fish grow in it. Not going to grow in that water. This darn algae bloom one won't go away, Brian Nutt says. All of my cover plants along the shoreline are gone. I'm tempted to cut down some young water maple trees that are along the shallow parts and lay them in the water for cover. Should I? Yes. Brian Nutt's in Smithville, Kentucky, outside of Louisville. Well, that just so happens that's where Jim Allen lives, just outside of Louisville, Kentucky. Mark Dyer from Nebraska. What are the negatives to using aluminum sulfate for phosphorus binding? I know it can pH swing that could cause fish kills if you don't apply the proper buffer as needed, but is any of the negatives lasting or temporary? Some lake managers say it is the best and most economical, and others tell me it's the thing of the past and not good to use compared to newer products. Well, I'm going to give you my take on that, Mark. Aluminum sulfate, I'll tell you a story. Holy cow, this had to be, when was this? Sheesh. Almost 30 years ago. I dispatched the guy that worked for me, and those you guys may have heard this story before because I know I've told it. I dispatched one of my employees that was based in Bryan College Station. I had 2 offices back then. And I sent him to Shreveport, Louisiana to go to this. There was an old washed up football player whose daddy had a farm with a 15-acre lake that was muddy. So I sent him over there to use aluminum sulfate to clear up that muddy water. But I bought him a pH pen from Aquatic Ecosystems and said, dude, check the pH. Check it. Keep checking it. The minute the pH begins to change, slow down your application, because he was putting it in with an injection pump that we'd rigged up. And so, man, on his way back, I called him and said, hey, Paul, how'd it go? He said, oh, man, it was fantastic. He said, that water looked green and blue when we were finished. It almost looked like the Caribbean. Oh, my gosh. I felt goosebumps all over. I was about to melt right there. I knew what had happened. So I said, Paul, what was the pH? He said, it never changed. He said, pH pen, the little battery-powered pH pen, never got off a 7. I said, you got it with you? He said, yeah. I said, pull that transistor radio battery out, touch it to your tongue. The battery was dead. And so were the fish in that lake, because he had put in so much aluminum sulfate, and he was relying on this pH pen that the battery is dead in to help him decide when to stop. When he told me that water was cobalt blue like the Caribbean, I knew at that point that we'd killed every fish in Terry Bradshaw's daddy's lake, which we did. And I thought next morning at 8 o'clock I'm going to call Terry and tell him what we did. And at 7:58 he called me. He was not happy. Well, the old pond boss got to buy Terry Bradshaw's daddy a whole bunch of fish, which I should have. It was the right thing to do, because I didn't pay attention to what we should have been doing to take care of it. So one of the negatives to using aluminum sulfate for phosphorus binding is, yes, you can overdo it. The other negative to using aluminum sulfate for phosphorus binding is it doesn't necessarily bind all the phosphorus. And so if you don't decrease the input of phosphorus, then you can only bind so much of it when you're using aluminum sulfate. So basically what aluminum sulfate does is cause a chemical reaction that allows the alum or the aluminum, the cation, to connect with the phosphorus, the phosphate, to create aluminum phosphate, which becomes heavy and it sinks down into the mud and sequesters in the mud. So if you don't eliminate the input, and there's not a lot of chance that the alum is going to take out all of the phosphate or all the phosphorus out of the water. So the aluminum sulfate, even though it's a good product, there's no assurance that it's going to be able to sequester enough phosphorus to stop your algae bloom. And the newer products, I have to admit, I've not paid attention to that as much as I should. I'm more of a fish guy, and I'm keeping up with that the best I can. I'm looking at the different genetics. I'm looking at the different species. I'm trying to pay attention to the fishery, and I'm not quite paying attention as close as I probably should to the different sequestering agents. I'm going to scroll past that. Let's see. Lori, very cold, makes your hands hurt. Run it. You know what? If you're going to run that well, then Lori, what I would tell you to do is spray it in the air and let it contact the atmosphere before it hits the pond. That'll help warm it up. Danny Mac, I've watched larger bass pick off the 2 to 4 inch young as the young are fixed on bugs on the pond edge facing the wrong way. It's a harsh world out there, Danny Mac. It's a harsh world. You know, and when those fish don't learn how to play the game, they see darkness quickly and they become a nugget. Grape juice. Mark Dyer is talking about catfish with Bob Jones, and Bob Jones responds. John Dyer stocked the tilapia in July. I think stocking the tilapia in July is not relevant to the bluegill not spawning in July. I think that's more a function of the water temperature in the Carolinas in July. The bluegill tend to slow down with the reproduction when it's hot. So bluegill, like in the Carolinas, depending on what part, are going to spawn in March, then again in May, probably June, forego July and August, spawning into September. Then on a rare occasion, they'll spawn one more time, like in late October. John Dyer, what water temperatures should I start harvesting tilapia? They're going to get sluggish at 56 or 57. So if you can start catching them, and I don't know that they'll bite a hook, because that's really not their nature. If you can start harvesting them when the water's in the 60s, that's good. But what will happen, John, is when your water temperature starts to mitigate and get cooler, they'll start rising to the surface. Now here's the way, this is kind of an interesting little tidbit. The way tilapia die is the fat that they collect in their bodies distributes into their musculature. So what happens to bacon grease when the temperature drops? You know, when you're cooking bacon, the bacon fat's liquid. But when it gets to a certain temperature, it starts to solidify. That's what happens to tilapia. The fat that they collect when the water temperature begins to drop, begins to solidify in their flesh. And it makes it impossible for their muscles to move. So what they do is when that temperature approaches, then they'll start rising to the surface to seek the heat in the afternoon. That's the time you try to go out and get them. And you capture them with a dip net. Danny Mac, the newer products are really expensive for a large part of the lake I use. Okay, so look at there, he's promoting it. Mark Hicks, my bluegill are spawning, but I noticed the tilapia are eating many. You know, it's not common for bluegill fry to be eating bluegill eggs and fry. That's not common. Depending on the species of tilapia, really. Mark Hicks, Central North Carolina, started harvesting mine in October. Yep, well, there you go. There's a good answer, John Dyer. Central North Cackalack. You know, people in North Carolina think pulled pork is barbecue. It's not a slam, but that's what they think. They think barbecue sauce is vinegar and mustard. Not a slam. That's just the way it is. So guys, you know what? I think we're kind of getting to an end point here for the day. We got room for 2 more. Hey, Pond Boss Magazine. If you have not subscribed to Pond Boss, please do that. Oh, my gosh, I almost forgot. I think I've told you guys before that a couple of years ago, my oldest son said, hey, Dad, you got some cool stories? Would you write them down? I did. I've written over 60 stories. 25 of them have made the cut into my first memoir book. Well, Chico's convinced me, along with 6 or 8 other people, that some of those stories and the life lessons that are in them are entertaining enough that this book might be marketable. So I'm hoping to have it out shortly after Thanksgiving. I think it's going to cost about $30. I've gotten prices on what it's going to cost to print it. So if you guys are interested in my memoir book, there'll be the first book's going to have baseball stories, life lessons, and some fishery stuff. Hey, there's Cody. Cody, I mentioned you earlier today about Cody Borgfelds is with Texas Hunter. He's going to be at the Institute of Higher Pondology. So yeah, we're going to have a big time, buddy. And I was promoting that earlier. Jim Allen, I will say hi to Debbie. I will see her in just a few minutes because she's sitting on the other side of this door. Looky there, Mark Dyer found me a local lightly used Texas underfeeder for half price. Cody, what do you say about that? Feeding will start up again next year. Facebook is good for two things, watching the Pond Boss and shopping the marketplace. So there you are. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. Hey, JP Clayton. Patrick's hanging out in Indonesia. He's going to be coming here, and he'll be home headed your way. So today is Tuesday. He'll be here Thursday night. Are you at the airport? If not, you will be soon. So, Patrick, can't wait to hang out with you. So, guys, I'm going to wrap it up and just tell you that I really do appreciate you guys watching me, which it fascinates me that there's this many people that care about it and they're interested in it. And you know what? You help keep my brain active. So I love sharing what I know, and I love hanging out with you. And we got room for 2 more at the Institute of Higher Pondology, October 23, 24, 25. I promise you it will be well worth it. So you guys send me an email, info@pondboss.com. We'll get you signed up. And I don't know where I'll be next Tuesday night, but I got a pretty good feeling it's going to be hanging out with you. So until next Tuesday night, 7:30 to 8:30, adios for now.